Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Therefore, what we've established is that the upward distribution of wealth engineered by the Reagan administration, actually starting under Carter with the great U-turn of Carter and Reagan, has engineered an upward distribution of wealth, gouging working people, the poor, the lower middle class, and the middle class, and concentrating the wealth in the hands of a paper-thin stratum of super-rich parasites. 140-41. Those are your guidelines. The top 1% hold 40% of the assets, accumulated wealth. The bottom 40% have 1%, less, 0.3%. But you can even say 40-0 if you want. But our nice symmetry, 140-41. And just remember those little caveats. And now we're told we have to fight distributionism and give tax cuts for the rich. Back in the New Deal, I can remember personal experience in 1960 as a junior high school student or high school student, Flushing High School, New York City. We had a very good economics teacher, and he brought in some newsletters either from Chase Manhattan, well, at that point it would have been Chase National Bank, or First National City Bank. These were newsletters that they put out to their following. And we had one study in there showing that in 1960, the top 5% of assets had 20% of the assets of the country, and the bottom 20% had 5%. And I believe these were assets. So 5, 20, 25. I believe it's assets. It might have been income. That would make it rather different, but the idea would be the same. 5, 20, 25. And a journalist had written a little jingle about this because this was viewed as a social problem, as a distortion in society. And the jingle was, look at the distribution of the pie. 5, 20, 25, top 5% get 20% of the wealth. The bottom 20% get 5% of the wealth. 5, 20, 25, when the pie is in such a plight, better bolt the door at night. In other words, you're going to have social tensions, crime, the destruction of the tissue of the social fabric. And that's what you had. But now it's not 5, 20, 25. It's 140, 41 on the asset side. So this is Pottersville, and this is the kind of exceptionalism you don't want, where you're at the very bottom of the social mobility ladder, saved only by the bloody city of London from going off the edge into the most stratified, the most oligarchical society. Now, changing gears from this, let's look at the question of Assange and related issues. Now, Assange is getting, he's basking in even more publicity. He's on the front page of all kinds of magazines. He spent 7 or 8 days in jail, and you could see lining up for him were the radical chic left-wing or right-wing libertarians, pseudo-intellectuals of much of the world. Radical chic means you're for Assange. We saw Michael Moore even dipping into his money, which is not a common thing, to pay Assange's bail. Let's see whether Michael Moore gets his money back. We could see Bianca Jagger. We could see a whole collection of British left-wing radical chic types. The chicoria of the world, what we could say, the motto for WikiLeaks, chicoria of the world unite. You have nothing to gain but your transparency, or you have nothing to lose but your secrets. The rich elitists came out for Assange. I wondered in passing, where were those rich elitists when Larry Sinclair was arrested at the National Press Club at the end of a press conference and was dragged into the D.C. jail and kept there for the weekend, and then put through a harrowing legal ordeal, including threatening him with life imprisonment as a multiple-time loser for some obscure violation that they had dredged up. But let that pass. The rich elitists, of course, are going to do what they're going to do. As Machiavelli says, the few, the oligarchs, always act like oligarchs, and this doesn't really change. But let's look, in addition to this general outpouring of support from these wealthy elitists, radical chic types, let's look specifically at where Assange is ending up. Now, his backer in this case is somebody called Vaughn Smith. Vaughn Smith, known as a right-wing libertarian. Vaughn Smith, of course, is a former British military officer. He was an officer of the Grenadier Guards, one of the more prestigious of the British historical hereditary regiments. And indeed, his father and I think his grandfather were also officers of the Grenadier Guards. And this guy is a bloody aristocrat. He is a latifundist. He owns an estate. It's called Ellingham Hall. And this is on the border between Norfolk and Suffolk. It's an organic farm these days. So he's a gentleman farmer. Don't confuse this Ellingham Hall with the one in Northumberland, which I did for a minute. No. This is the Norfolk-Suffolk East Anglian one. And Vaughn Smith had been in the British Army. He served in Ulster, Northern Ireland. That must have been quite ugly. Cyprus, not pretty there either. And in Germany. Can we wonder whether Vaughn Smith is from British military intelligence? There might be a suspicion in that regard. I would certainly have such a suspicion. Vaughn Smith then is not just sort of a Colonel Blimp retiring to hunting, fishing, and hounds and the chase, but rather he goes to London and he founds Frontline News TV, which seems to focus on delving into various war situations, crisis spots around the world, doubtless hewing the British intelligence line, and then the Frontline Club. And by British intelligence, I mean the radical sort of opposition line that you'll find in the left, let's say the left wing of the British intelligence establishment, left of the Guardian. He's not just the founder of Frontline News TV, he's the founder of Frontline Club in 2003. This is an area in Paddington, which has been a hotbed and base for Wikipedia supporters in London. So now Assange will be operating out of the Georgian mansion, built in the style of Palladio, Ellingham Hall. This is, it's in Norfolk, but it's close enough to the border so that the nearest town is Bungay, Suffolk, so we can call Assange Friar Bungay. That's a literary reference. Look it up. Friar Bungay of Suffolk is going to be Assange. So you look at this pattern of institutional support for Assange, and that's very suspicious. Now, one of the victims of Assange, attempted victims, as I pointed out in that ANSA wire, you can read it on my website now, the ANSA, Italian National News Agency. I put out a wire at the beginning of last week that this was a striptease by the CIA. Striptease is a shorthand for self-exposure by the CIA. But now, of course, we have to give ample space to the MI6 aspect of the entire thing, and indeed GCHQ, that General Communications Headquarters in Cheltenham. They can be part of it too. Don't leave them out. And they seem to be the prominent ones, because the current situation is that it's very unlikely, we're told by UK legal observers, that the U.S. could ever get Assange extradited from Britain. You can't get him extradited. The British judges don't like the extradition treaty. They feel that it makes them too servile compared to the evil U.S., and therefore they're not going to extradite him, so he's going to be able to operate with his computers. He's operating out of Ellingham Hall, the Georgian pile in Norfolk in East Anglia. Smelly situation.